Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pretend Pros podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Jenny Hoffman. I consider myself the rookie, and in today's topic, I am definitely a rookie.
And I am Beth. I am the IU fan. Once again, to Jenny's dismay, that will be relevant for this episode. So I'm wearing my Indiana Hoosiers alumni shirt because we have an IU alum on the program. So welcome to the program, Payton Dilger. Payton is the third graduate of the Forest Park High School that we have had on the podcast. I think we are the unofficial podcast for this high school. We were just talking before we started recording, a very athletic high school for not being very big. So my friend Matt, who I talked about in previous episodes, was actually our connection yet again to Payton. I think at this point, he's at least earned himself a free drink, even if we're not paying him a booking fee. And I would be remiss if I did not say, because I think she's going to listen to this episode, that Payton is a very good friend of Matt's daughter, Claire. I love all of Matt's three children, but Claire went to IU, so she holds a special place in my heart. So shout out Claire. So while in high school, Payton was on the dance team, soccer, and tennis, but then switched things up when she got to Indiana. It was on the rowing team, I believe, for 3 years. So we are going to learn all kinds of things about rowing, which Jenny and I know almost nothing about. So welcome to the program, Payton.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So we started talking about this a little bit. So as I mentioned, I've been friends with Matt for, we won't even say how many years, a very, very long time. Matt and I worked together back in what my friend's daughter likes to call the 1900s, because it was that long ago. And so one of the times I came to visit, I actually saw Claire perform in dance, and I believe you probably would have been on the team at the same time as her. Yeah. So I'm curious because obviously, at least my limited experience with going to one dance competition is very, very different from rowing. So how did you get into rowing, since I don't think many high schools have that as a sport? So how did you make that transition?
So that's actually a funny story. I was getting recruited for soccer. I was trying to get recruited for that. And then eventually, so I had a whole profile and everything, talking to coaches. But eventually I realized I couldn't go any bigger than a D2 school, but I really wanted to go to a bigger school than that. So I was just going to put sports to the side. And then the IU rowing coaches reached out to me and emailed me, and they were like, we saw your soccer profile and we want you to come for a visit. So that's kind of how I got into it.
That is interesting. So I'm assuming schools because it's probably hard to recruit out of high school. Is that how most of your teammates made it onto the team? Is the coaches were looking for athletes who maybe weren't going to play a sport already at the school they were going to?
Yeah. So novice is what you would call the first year rowers. And Big Ten has this cool thing where most of their freshman rowers are novice, which means they have never rowed before they got to college. So that's how they try to recruit people, was just try to get athletes that weren't going to do their sport anymore and wanted to go D1 in some sport, and they would find them through that. But then the other half of novice rowers would just be freshmen, tall freshmen that they would find that already went to IU in the fall, and they would be like, hey, you should just come try out. And then so we would have a bunch of people try out, and then that's who made up the novice of the team.
So you mentioned tall, and I saw that throughout some of my research I was trying to do. And honestly, I guess I wouldn't even thought that you had to be tall for this sport, but I guess most people are.
Yes, it's usually easier when you're taller, just because you can generate more force with your legs. You can do it when you're shorter. I had a roommate who was probably about 5'6", and she still did it.
Okay.
So once you got started, obviously having played soccer, dance, and tennis, what surprised you about rowing? Because this had to have been, did you know anything before you agreed to be on the team?
No, I had no idea what I was getting into. My parents were just like, you should try it. It'll be really fun. And I'm glad they made me do it, but it was nothing like what I was expecting. There was a lot more endurance than I thought there would be in this, which I should have known there was going to be a lot of endurance. But then there's also a lot of sprint pieces, because rowing a race is only about 7 minutes long. So you'd really only have to have endurance for about 7 minutes, but 7 minutes is a lot longer than it seems like.
And is there a standard distance for these competition meets?
2,000 meters.
Yep. And it's always 2,000 meters?
Most of them are the big races, like the Big Tens and NCAAs, are all 2,000 meters.
So
Okay.
maybe to start with, because I have a feeling like most people listening to our podcast, probably like us, just don't know much about rowing. Do you want to explain like the different positions? Because I think there are like different roles based on where you sit in the boat, right?
Yeah, so there's actually two different kinds of boats too that race in the Big Ten and NCAAs. You have your boats with 8 people that actually have 9 in it because there's a coxswain, and that is the person who steers the boat. And then you have the boat with 4 people who actually has 5 in it because of the coxswain is also in that. So it counts from the seat that's closest to the front when you're facing. It's going to be towards the stern, but it's towards our front because you face the stern in the boat.
Okay, and help me understand, what's a stern?
That's like the back of the boat.
Okay,
And then bow is the front of the boat.
got it.
So then every other seat is going to be a port or a starboard. So that basically just means what side your oar is on. So I was a port, so my oar was always on my right, but it's usually left because that's what it is on a boat. It's the left of the boat, but my right.
Right.
So then it was in the seats, it just counted backwards from the stern. It went 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And in the 4s, it was just 4, 3, 2, 1. And the only real big difference is that the person who sat in the stern usually set the rhythm for the boat. So they were the ones that everyone followed. They usually had really good rhythm. They could get a good rate and everything. And so that was the most, I wouldn't say important, but that was the more like they really had to think about who they wanted there. And then they usually say seat 7 is just somebody who can follow really well and keep that. And then seats 6, 5, and 4 are usually considered like your powerhouse. Those are going to be your strongest girls, the girls who can pull the most on the rowing machine. But that's usually where they go. And then the back 3 is usually just the girls who have the best technical rowing usually. Because in the bow, it becomes really important when you have all of the blades, nothing's in the water, but you're moving in the boat, your blades have to be the same. And the bow, if you're tipping one way or another, then the boat will tip. And you don't want that.
Did you ever tip over as you were practicing?
I didn't, thank goodness, but I did have teammates who did.
Yeah, my brother was actually on the crew team for Michigan. It's a club team there. It's not a scholarship team. And he was in the middle 3, like the core power, which is so funny because he's my younger brother. So, I mean, he's much bigger than I am, but like you never think of your own sibling as being like that powerful. But he was the same way. I mean, obviously he didn't row in high school, and I don't think they found him until he'd been there a year. He didn't row as a freshman for sure, but he was in like that middle 3 where, you're getting all the power. So
Yeah.
in my mind, I didn't know he was so strong, but I guess he was.
What would you say the biggest misconception about rowing is?
I would say that most people would think it's easy because you can get into it after high school. Like you don't have to do it to be Division 1. It's not easy at all. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And the only part that I would that you could say is easy is the technicality of it. That's why people can pick it up. But it really is a lot more. There's some athletes, real good athletes on this team.
Yeah. So to that point, like how much is success? How much of it is like how physically strong you are and like the endurance versus the skill side of it?
So the erg, which is the rowing machine that we use in the gym, is what determines split. And basically the split is an average. It'll give you an average for what you would be pulling per 500 meters. So usually that split, the lower it is, the better. And we would do test pieces. So we would do like a 6,000 meter test. And our standard was to be below a 2-minute and 3-second split, which means you averaged less than 2 minutes and 3 seconds per 500 meters throughout the whole 6,000 meters. And then a 2K was just kind of as fast as you could go, but you wanted your split to be lower than a 155.
I'm smiling and shuddering because I do spend time on Concept 2 rowers, and I hate them with a passion. You really have to have some power in your legs to sustain that. And I just don't.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's not very tall either, so I don't think
I'm
she
not
would have been a
tall.
rower.
Yeah, that is also limiting for my.
Yeah. It also probably, if you don't have the right form, your back can start to hurt.
Yeah.
That can be a factor into that.
I feel like I probably pull too much in my arms and don't just let my legs do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just get the rhythm, letting your legs do most of the work, it wouldn't feel as hard, but
Yeah.
haven't mastered the technique.
How long did it take you to figure doing the right form so that it doesn't hurt and that you're the most efficient? How long does that take to figure out?
So they usually spend a majority of the fall teaching the novices how to get the right form and how to have the correct rate, because you can't go up too fast on the slide. And then again, you don't want to pull more with your arms than your legs. So the majority of the fall is spent doing that. And then once you hit winter, you can't even go out on the water anymore. So then winter is just a ball erg pieces, and so that's like a big time for everyone to fix everything. And then spring, you get back on the water and you practice with varsity, so you have to be ready to go by spring.
So are you sliding in your seat in the boat?
The boat is very similar to the rowing machine that you would have in the
Okay.
gym. The seats move, so they move just like they would, and then the handle is just like what you would grab from the oar. It moves with you. It's all the same thing.
So how many boats would IU have? Because it seems like if you're all racing at different speeds, you kind of have to clump together rowers who are like a little bit more in the same pace. Otherwise, if you had somebody who was like super fast and somebody who wasn't, that's never going to work, right?
Yeah, so at Big Tens, everyone bases it off Big Tens and NCAAs because those are the big races. So you race 2 8s there and then 3 4s for varsity, and then novice will also have 2 8s. So you have your 1v8 is your best people. That's your fastest boat. That's who's going to be the fastest people on the team. And then your 2v8 is usually the next fastest. Sometimes teams will put some people in the 4 just because they're better technical rowers and they want their 1v4 to be fast.
And novice boats are racing against the other novice boats,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
they don't race the varsity, yeah.
Now, when you go to one of these competitions, is it just the one 2,000 meter race and you're done? Or what does that competition look like?
It depends for every place, but usually it is just the 2,000 meters. You'll have the ones like when you go to the Big Ten Invite where you have a bunch of teams and the races go from Friday to Sunday, where you'll do 2 races on Saturday and then 1 on Sunday. And even Big Tens now, they split it up. It used to just be one 2,000 meter race. But since we had Washington come in, like we had a bunch of those teams come in, it's now heated.
How many competitions are you racing within a season?
That's a good question. I never really counted. It was a majority of the weekends in the spring. Once it got after spring break. So spring break, we have this huge training trip. And then after that, we would have our first race the week after our training trip. And then after that, so I would say from the end of March till the end of May, there's races almost every single weekend.
It's still pretty chilly in the Midwest in March. That had to be fun.
Yeah, I remember. So that first race is usually always in Tennessee. And I remember the very first time going there when I was a novice, it was snowing outside for our race. It was
Wow.
freezing cold. Yeah.
Yikes. That's got to be a little rough.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, grabbing the oar, do you get a lot of calluses and blisters?
Yeah. So my hands looked pretty rough when I did rowing. It's not even calluses, your hand just rips open. It's
Ooh.
just, you just have rips all over your hands. I used to get it really bad in my thumb. Can't see it anymore, but I used to have like a flat patch that was scarred on my thumb. But yeah, it just
So
ripped.
gloves are not a thing?
You can't wear gloves because you have to turn the oar. So when you're holding the oar, you have your outside hand stay straight, but when you're rowing, you have to feather, which just means you turn it. So your hand is going like this the whole time, and if you don't have a grip with it, then it doesn't work.
Oof.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm out. Can't wear gloves. You got to do this in snow.
Yeah,
We
it
already
was rough
established you're too
sometimes.
short anyway, so they wouldn't have. Well, so Jenny probably could have been a coxswain, right? Because aren't the coxswains a little bit more petite?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, they are usually.
All right.
Yeah,
You
so
could have been a
can you
coxswain.
talk about their role and what their training looks like? Because they're a little bit different than everyone else in the boat.
Yeah, so they did this strength training with us. Most of the time they would lift. Sometimes when it got more to spring, they would do endurance while everyone else was lifting. But during our erg practices, when we were inside, they would just be walking around writing down numbers. They would be coaching people, writing down numbers, like just trying to fix people's form, trying to keep the morale up. And then when we get out on the water, they wear this headpiece that has a microphone and there's speakers throughout the boat, so you can hear what the coxswain says to you. So during practice, we would do drills and they would be the ones calling the drills. So the coaches would tell them what to call and then they would be calling the drills, and that would be that practice. And then they're also steering the boat. So if we needed to go right, there's 2 little handles in the front and it would move something that steered it to the right or the left. And then during a race, there's different calls you could make during a race, but it's basically, they're just the motivators. They're trying to get these 8 women to go as fast as they possibly can for 7 minutes.
So they're not saying like left, right, left, like
No.
they're not telling you when to row because you're just rowing, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So what are some of the calls that they are making then?
So in a race, you usually have like a race plan. And it's just like motivation plans. So when we would get to the 500 mark, she would say we're going to have bow 4, row as hard as they can. And she would say 1, 2, and then that would try to get bow 4 to row even harder than they were. And then she would do the same for stern 4. And then it was just calls like that just to kind of like make sure everyone was still going, keep everyone accountable, things like that. And then when it got to the end, so they're also the ones who are checking side to side to see how even boats are with us. So they would tell us where we are in a boat. So like if she was sitting on 2 seat of the team next to us, she would let us know that we're ahead a little bit because she's up farther than their coxswain. And so she would try to motivate us that way. At the very end of the race, the last 250 meters is where it's an all-out sprint. And usually you bring up the rate, and the rate is just how fast you're actually putting the blade in. And so usually we'd be rowing our races at, I want to say like a 32, but at the end we would bring our rate up, try to bring it up to a 36. So our blades were going in faster and faster. And so she would tell us how fast we were going.
That's interesting. So for the novice team, then, is the coxswain also a novice? Is that part of the requirement?
Yes. Yeah. Those are usually...
So how do they get, because that's a lot of stuff. Like, it sounds like almost like a little mini coach, but to be brand new at the sport and to be a little mini coach seems like that'd be hard to do.
Yeah, so coxswains aren't usually recruited from outside sports. They're usually ones who they're like walk-ons. They find them when they're already at IU, and then they try to teach them. So they have to learn the whole sport, and then they also have to be able to see the form. So the coaches will have them during erg days and be like, this is what you want to look for. And then they'll just do that. But anyone who's recruited from being a coxswain in high school usually goes straight to varsity.
Okay, I gotcha. Because there are some high schools that had a rowing team, right? Yeah, okay.
Yep. But I think what's new in the Big Ten, I think it just started like last year or the year before, maybe. You can actually have rowed in high school and be on the novice team now. It used to not be like that when I started. You had to be a first-year rower, never rowed before if you were on novice. But I think now you're only allowed to be on novice 1 year.
That's interesting. So if you were the coach and you had plenty for varsity, your novice team could all of a sudden be better because you have at least somebody who has rowed before.
Yes, if they have not rowed in the novice boats before, they are allowed to row in the novice boats. Yeah.
Okay, so I found some other terms on the intranet for rowing. I don't know what any of these mean, so I'm just going to run through them, and hopefully they are true and the internet didn't fool me. So what is a swing, and how do you know when the boat has it?
So the swing is when you push off with your feet and your back goes back. So like when you're on the rowing machine, you think of when you're laying back. It's the layback of the boat. And so the swing is actually the part of the row of the entire thing where you get the most power, because it's the end of when your feet push off and it's when your blade is coming out of the water. And so if the boat has a good swing, they're producing a lot of power.
All right, so it was a real thing. That's good.
Okay, all right. 1 for 1. Sweep rowing versus sculling. What is the actual difference?
So sculling is you have 2 oars in your hand. So we did sweep rowing, where you only have one blade and you're just sweeping. But sculling, it's usually done in a single or a double where you'll scull, but you have both oars and you have to bring them both together.
Okay. And IU did not have that form of rowing?
Well, they don't have that in the Big Tens at all. They don't race any sculling. All of the boats are sweeping.
Okay.
It's funny. I picture sculling in like movies where like, the Ivy League, I think is like very, prestigious rowers and it's like part of their thing. Or maybe like Cambridge over in England. I always picture that as sculling. I feel like there have been movies, maybe this like predates both of you. I can picture like some movie where they're sculling, but it's like the Northeast or England where it's like fancy people and, this is like a huge deal.
All right. Is yelling power 10 a thing?
Yes. So that is one of the calls that the coxswains can make in the race. So that's what I was getting at there when they yell like in 2, we'll do a power 10. And then the next 10 strokes are as hard as you can go.
Okay. The internet did not let me down.
I do feel like when my brother was on the team, there was a whole thing about whether you called it crew or rowing. Is that like that they were, you never said rowed crew because they were like this, like that doesn't make sense in a sentence. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So crew, I mean, they're the same thing. You were on the crew team or you were on the rowing team. I always just said I was on the rowing team, but you'd have people that you would meet from the East Coast. So I'd be like, oh, I'm on the rowing team. And they would be like, oh, you're on crew.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, same thing.
It's like up in the Northeast, it's like a whole other thing, right? To be on the crew team. So it's like the crew is like fancy. Yeah.
So for people who have never watched rowing before, what should they pay attention to if they, happen to see it on TV or in the Olympics?
Really, I would pay attention to if you can hear what the coxswain is saying. If the announcers ever put it on one of the coxswains, that's one of the most interesting things of the race because you can really hear how the team is moving. But it's kind of a hard sport to watch. It's like watching cross country. You see bits and pieces of it, and it's like you can't really tell what's going on, but you can see who wins in the end.
I think like when you got it all to perfection, it's probably very pretty.
Yes.
Right? Like the blades come up all like uniformly, go in uniformly. Is that what most teams are going to look like? Or is that incredibly hard to have it be that precise?
When you're at the level, if they're putting the rowing on TV, like Olympic level, they're all going to look like that because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten to that level. But college rowing, you're going to have a few people mess up. And then there's always wind. Wind is always a factor and can make it look really messy.
I would think in the spring when it's like that kind of cold in the weather, that there's probably a huge element.
Yep, definitely.
So how much of it is physical strength versus just timing and technique?
That's a really good question because I never fully figured that out. In the 3 years that I was on the team, I never knew which one to perfect more. They harped on both equally. So if you didn't have good technique, it was try to fix your technique, but also you need to get stronger because your technique's not good. So if you pull harder, it makes up for it. But you have to almost be equal in both to be considered a perfect rower. If you're stronger, but you're not technically capable of moving the boat, you're usually what's called as a boat stopper, which means that you are really fast and you seem like you would really move a boat. But when you are in there, if your blade goes in at the wrong time, you can actually slow the boat down. So you have to have the technicality, but if your power is not there, you're still also not going to move the boat.
Yeah, so to that point, are you training year-round then for this?
It's close to year-round. So we started in September is always like the first official practice when you have to meet standard and everything like that. And then you go all the way through to May. And then depending on NCAAs, if you make NCAAs or not, it'll go into the beginning of June. But then this summer we have off and they just give us a summer packet and you have that from June to July and August. And August is when you start having the unofficial practices where the coaches aren't there, but everyone still gets together and does all of the practices on the schedule together. and then starts in September again.
In regards to your training, are you lifting a lot of like heavy weights and doing like squats and that kind of weight training to supplement the endurance on the erg?
Yeah, so the fall is when they really harp those. They want you to lift a lot in the summer, and then the fall is when we work a lot with our trainer and our strength coach to get that lifting in. We had 2-a-days on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So you would go in on Monday, all of those mornings you would go in, start lift at, I think it was like 7 a.m. and then end lift at 8 a.m. So it'd be like an hour lift. You ended an hour and then you'd have practice. We'd have practice Monday through Saturday for 2 hours rowing. And then in the spring, it was more focused on getting the technicality of things. So we would have some lift in the afternoon on those 2-a-days, but they would do more of, let's get a little more mileage, which just means rowing more. So it just depended on how they were feeling.
So we've had a couple former athletes on, and then even, a few that are still doing athletics in college. And I will say, I think most of them who are done or maybe about to be done have talked about they do not miss that.
Yeah.
Are you happy to just be a regular workout person at this point
Yes.
versus a rowing workout?
Yeah, very much. I loved it, but it was getting to the point where my body could not handle it anymore. It was a lot of working out.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Well, imagine on top of the workouts, it's your school too.
Yeah, it is. I remember the worst part of my entire experience, which most people do not agree with this, but the worst part about Friday mornings in the fall is we would run stadiums.
Ooh.
So we would be in Memorial Stadium, running up to the press box and back down and run it for a whole hour. That was probably, at that point, my freshman year, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I would go to bed on Thursdays. I would be like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I would make it through every fall. And then I'd do it all over again the next year.
Thank God Memorial Stadium's not as big as some stadiums in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Still, that does not sound like a fun way to start your Friday. Holy mackerel.
Nope, not at all. Especially when you have 8 a.m. chemistry right after it.
Well, yikes. Yeah, what was your major at IU?
Exercise science. I was pre-physical therapy. So I actually just finished my first semester of grad school this summer.
Okay, nice. For a year and a half then? Is it a 2-year?
It's 3 years.
3 years. Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'll graduate in 2029. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That probably feels like ever from now.
IU for grad school as well?
No, they actually don't have physical therapy on the Bloomington campus. And I decided to go to Indiana State.
The Sycamore as well.
So what would you say is one of the coolest places that you got to race?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't actually race in this one. I went as a spare, but we raced at Princeton. And that was one of the prettiest places I have ever seen or gone to in all 3 years that I went to all the training trips. We raced in Sarasota, Florida. That was always really nice. It was always really hot, but it was really nice.
Funniest thing that ever happened during a race? I guess you said you never tipped a boat over, but I'm assuming you saw people fall in the water.
Yeah, actually, my sophomore year, we had the freshmen who were novices doing a race, and one girl caught a crab. And for people who don't know what a crab is, it's where your blade goes into the water, and then it's supposed to stay straight up. But if it gets turned at all, it gets caught under the water, and then it'll go forward and the back of it will hit you. And so that's called a crab. But she caught an ejector crab.
Oh my gosh.
So it threw her out of the boat in the middle of the Big Ten race. And so that boat barely finished. She had to swim to the shore. They were last. And that was just, she ended up getting a crab tattoo because it was so memorable.
When you said caught a crab, I thought you meant like an actual, like.
I did too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's gotta hurt though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ouch.
Thank goodness I've never caught a crab in a race, but I couldn't imagine it. They hurt in practice, so I couldn't imagine at the rate you're going in a race. That would be awful.
That's got to be so embarrassing to have to swim and like crawl up the bank.
What is the speed that these boats are going?
They never really measured that. They would tell you what your stroke rate was. I guess I could do the math. If you finish a race in about 7 minutes, so 7 minutes, 2,000 meters, whatever that math would be.
I mean, it's going fast enough that I would think hitting the And the sternum with an oar would not be fun. Wind knocked out of you, and the next thing you know, you're sitting in the water and then you're watching your boat go by. Yeah, that does not sound like
Yeah.
fun.
What would you say your unpopular rowing opinion is?
That's a good question. I would say morning practices in the spring were always my favorite. And that would be unpopular because it's usually freezing cold. But I liked it because it would wake you up and you would be ready. Your day would already be started and you didn't have to worry about going back to practice later.
So considering it sounds like at some point you didn't expect to be a student athlete just based on the path you took. So I know you said you enjoyed it. Like, what do you think you got out of, particularly out of doing a sport you didn't know anything about? I would think that's a pretty unique experience.
Yeah, I would say that the friendships I got out of it was amazing, which every athlete would probably say that coaches chose the perfect people.
Yeah.
But I would say that I learned how to really have dedication. It took a lot of dedication to want to keep showing up to that sport and the work ethic that you have to be able to show up for not only yourself, but your teammates. It takes a lot.
Certainly seems like it. I often say to people who do anything beyond just go to classes, like I feel like I could barely manage going to school and like figuring out how to do my own laundry and feed myself. So I'm impressed with every student athlete who manages to balance all of that and then a pretty intense schedule of like the athletic side of it. It's impressive for sure.
No, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially getting up that early, that many days a week. I mean,
Yeah.
there's grown adults that don't even do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're kind of forced to, but it worked out.
So the question I will end on is the question that I have asked all the athletes that have come on the podcast. If someone is interested in possibly rowing in college, what would you say to them as far as how to train and how to take that next step?
I would say try to start lifting as much as possible because you can always come in stronger than everyone, but the technicality is what they teach you. So if you're already ahead of everyone in the strength aspect, you can really get ahead of everyone once they start teaching you how to technically row.
Yeah, and this one seems interesting too, because most of the people we've talked to, when they were in college playing the sport, it was one that they had played before, right? Either in high school or sometimes, right, since they were little kids, depending on what it was. So this is kind of interesting because this is such a unique sport that, to Jenny's point, like lots of people could be not doing this. You hear nowadays with youth sports, like if you don't start being a perfectionist at it when you're 10 years old, right? You're never going to play in college. And so
Yeah,
this one's certainly unique in that somebody who's, listening today as a high school kid, could become a Division I scholarship athlete, especially I think on
yeah,
the women's side,
yeah,
without having to have been doing it since, there's like no regret of like, well, I didn't start when I was 10, so now I'm just out of luck. So it's definitely
exactly.
interesting for sure.
I would say if you get the opportunity to take it, because it doesn't come to everyone, but if you go looking for it or if it finds you, I would do it. Because
Yeah.
it really is a unique experience, but also it's just the coolest thing that you could do.
Yeah, definitely interesting. It's funny, we've laughed a few times. Like sometimes when we do these interviews, Jenny decides that she's going to go try whatever we're talking about. It sounds like she's not going to get on a
Hey,
boat.
I try it almost every week at my gym. I'll just get on that rower, and I have not proven myself out that I can do it in a boat yet.
So it's funny because like, we did have somebody on who was a weightlifter, worked out with him before and is like, he's been a strength and training coach. And so I was like, okay, I will take something from this episode and do a better job at the gym. So I will admit the rowing machine at the gym sort of intimidates me, but maybe after this, I will at least go try and see if I can
Yeah.
not injure myself. Maybe
Mhm.
not as fast, like just nice and slow, at least get a little bit of a workout.
Yeah.
You're much taller than me too, so you'll probably actually surprise yourself.
See how long you can stay on there.
Yeah, I might go with not very long because, like, I get on the stationary bike. Part of it, I get bored really fast, so that is part of my issue. But it doesn't take long before I'm like, wow, these are not the same muscles that I use every day. This hurts more than I thought it was going
Yeah.
to. I have a feeling rowing is going to be the same problem, but I will at least attempt it and see how it goes. So,
You'll have to let me know.
yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was super interesting. Maybe I'll get my brother to listen to it to prove that now I know more about rowing from like when he was doing it.
Yeah, you'll have to let him know.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. And if you've liked what you've heard and you've stuck with us this far, we would love for you to subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. We hope to see you next week.